Hello everybody, this is Kostas Tsakas and this is our fourth tutorial in Photoshop. Now before we get into the details of editing in Photoshop, I want to introduce you to the different file types and categories that images fall into. Now the first big category is compressed versus uncompressed. And compressed are the images that you view in your everyday life. You view them on websites and your camera takes compressed images, and everywhere you go you're gonna view compressed images. Uncompressed images are usually used by professionals and they take up much more space on your disk. It's just that they have slightly more detail. And what happens is compressed images are the final result of your camera, like the final file that you get on your computer, whereas uncompressed images, it's just as the camera takes the picture with no editing done to it, because there is some editing done to the image by the camera, you just don't know it. And just as it is taken by the sensor, you get the uncompressed file. And that's what photographers want, because they have more detail and they get to be good at their jobs just because they get the best out of the images. So let's just see an example of what happens and how you get the uncompressed image. Now, this is the process that it takes for an image to get from the sensor to the final JPEG file, and that is the final image you get. Now, what happens is a raw image, at the second stage, as you can see, you just get the raw file of that image, and that's just all the info, no editing done to them, and that's what photographers take usually. Now, the compressed images have also two categories, and the one of them is the lossy compression and there's the lossless compression. And you can basically compress images just a little bit, but losing none of the quality of the image. So lossless compressions are basically compressions like WinZip, where you just compress files without losing any of the data, whereas lossy compressions are compressions where you just cheat by throwing some of the pixels that you don't need away, and you just get an image with less quality, but you save a lot more space. And I want to give you an idea of how bigger uncompressed images are versus compressed images. And compressed images can be 5 to 10 megabytes max, whereas uncompressed images can be like 20, 30, 40, or even 50 megabytes, and that's just fine for them. Now the next big category is raster and vector images, and basically raster images is just a collection of pixels that you put them all together and you make up an image, whereas vector images is like equations that describe the lines that you have on your image. So no matter how much you zoom in or out of those images, the vector images, you don't get to lose any of the quality. And you're like, hey, why didn't we use vectors for everyday photos? And well, that's virtually impossible because you can't describe every single line of nature with an equation. So that's why basically whenever you're going to see an image that is a vector, it's going to look more like a clipboard and not like a photo. Whereas raster images are going to be the usual photos that you view every day. And vector images are created in programs like Photoshop and mostly Illustrator, because that's the program that's also made by Adobe, but that is just made for vector basically. So if I have an example right here, and right here we have an image that is basically, we have two versions of the same image. One of this line that is a raster image and one of this line that is a vector image. And if I start zooming in, you can just see that we kind of start losing some of the clarity that we had. It's not that sharp as it used to be. So that's the grainy effect that you get on every photo whenever you zoom in. So what happens over here is I have the vector file of this image, and if I just start zooming in, you'll see that I get to lose none of the quality of this image, and that is because every line is described, as I said, from a formula, and whenever I zoom in or out, the image gets redrawn every time, so you get that sharp effect every time. And imagine this line, for example, and that's like a clear line, a clear curve. And imagine a formula behind it that says, okay, we have this line that is that has that height, is that angle that's curvy, and you know, it describes this line. So whenever you want to draw it, if I zoom in or out, it doesn't matter because it knows how to draw it every single time. And you get that sharp effect. You don't lose any of the quality zooming in or out of the image. Now, oops, I'm sorry, I opened Photoshop up. The next thing I'm going to talk about is file formats. And file formats are basically the way you save the images on your computer. And the first file format is PSD. We're going to be using that a lot in Photoshop. And whenever you save a Photoshop document, that's what PSD stands for. Well, except for just saving the image, you get to save some other info such as layers and masks, and we're going to see what they are later on. But if you want to keep on working on a project on an image that you were working before, it's usually better to save it on a PSD file because you can undo some of the changes that you have done to the image. It saves also some editing info that you have done, yeah. So that's the idea behind PSD, and they're usually a little bit larger than the actual image. Now the TIFF file you're going to see from time to time, it's also a little bit larger and it has some advantages, but I'm not going to go over them like right now. Now the JPEG file, that one you're going to see 95% of the time. And basically JPEG is, remember when we talked about compressions, it's a lossy compression. And what a lossy compression means is that you basically, they have some smart algorithms that basically decide which pixels to throw away and which pixels to keep, and you get a small file size of your image. You don't see much difference in the quality, but you see a lot of difference in the disk space. That's why JPEG is the preferred file format for everybody. Now GIF is usually used for photos like clip arts because what GIF does is it has a palette of 256 colors, and you can just pick from those 256 colors to save your image. So you can't have a photo that is made with 256 colors just because that's too little. But GIF format is great because it supports transparency and you can use it on the web a lot of the times. Now the PNG format was made to replace the GIF format, and it supports transparency as well. And what transparency basically is that you can see through the image if it has a transparent background, and if you put the image on a website you can see what is at the back of the image. So PNG has a much larger palette of a lot of colors, so you basically don't lose much of the quality. You can use it to save photos. It supports transparency and it's great for the web a lot of the times. Now BMP is just a file format made by Windows. I just wanted to mention that in case you see it, but there's nothing special to it. It's, I think, the worst file format. It has no compression, nothing smart to it. And RAW is not actually a file format because there are a lot of different file formats that you can save RAW images into. It's just the idea of uncompressed images. They're saved as RAW files, and that's the RAW data as you get it from the sensor, and that's just, I just wanted to mention that. So remember, PSD, Photoshop document, save us a little bit of the editing info as well. The TIFF, you're gonna see it from time to time. It has some advantages. We didn't go over them. JPEG, you see 95% of the time. It's a lossy compression. You get to lose some of the quality, but it's great because it saves size. GIF, the smallest file format. It has a palette of 256 colors, saves clip arts usually. And PNG, replacement for the GIF, supports transparency as well. BMP, just used by Windows, and RAW is uncompressed files. I hope you learned a little bit about those stuff, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. So see you guys next time.